Some people classify themselves by denominations. Some say, I am a Buddhist, and they pursue that path. Some say, I am a Christian, or a Jew, or a Muslim, or whatever, and they pursue that path. Now, some of us define our walk by magical technology, not by religion. Whatsoever wisdom, magical tech, whatsoever techniques in the process we find amongst the religions that work for us, defining us, let's say, technicians of the sacred, or Magoi or Magusians, the Hellenized Magoi, we find of utility for a purpose. And what is defining a mechanized, technologized society deprived of metaphysics? Well, this is this Faustian Spenglerian drive that developed as a virus of Judeo-Christianity, turning into the Faustian Antichrist, the Faustian Übermensch, that expands until it burns itself out. And the reply of accelerationists is to give it a final push, which is destroying the world. Because in order to prevent the disaster that the Faustian accelerationists pursue, it is to reform by the vector backwards. The Renaissance was reformed by Neoplatonism and the Attic virtues. So was the Neoclassicism. So was the Enlightenment period. So what I posit is that in every manner of the ethos of technology, even of magical technologies that may be very weird and may be very messy in this chaos of possibilities, there is one thing of responsibility for your freedom, delimitation. And whenever I find myself sterile in a Saturnian dead way, like a cyborg program perhaps, then you need to reach for the Platonic ontological realities. That is for things that are immanent. For example, if you find that you create a very complex watch or a very complex software or program, then when it is deprived of the ethos of the virtue of beauty, and muses as such are immortal ontologies, then it creates monsters and collapses upon yourselves as degeneration, as destruction, as nihilism. So that's the solution that I found reasonable for myself. That whatever you do, you put beauty and the approximation of truth and honesty into your work. Now, you may say that those virtues were prostituted, capitalized, renamed, rebranded, surrogated. However, there's a certain thing that is a priori. Ideas are the forces of the universe, the masks of divinities. In other sense, human beings evolved from monkeys have learned to interpret those ontologies in their own way. When you say hate, you invoke the power of destruction, the war of elements. When you invoke love, you invoke fusion of elements. And on the metaphysical side, it is the eros, the titanic creation of gods, that is the fusion, the yearning for the protean monad. And hate would be the destruction or the competition of those elements in the suburanic field, orphically speaking. So this is not a duality and never was, as the panentheistic whole posits. It's a concert. It's a concertation of forces that either are achieving a certain harmony or disharmony. Harmony and reform and growth, or destruction and decay. And these, as I call them, pockets of topologies, of entropies, are different across the universe. So in the solar system, Earth and human race may go up or down the generation and fall. In a different sector of the universe, different star systems, star clusters, on a different exoplanet, some other foreign race, if it developed a civilization, may rise to its finest at the same time. Whereas in a remote cluster of stars, perhaps Hyades, a civilization has fell so low hundreds of thousands of years ago that it is completely annihilated, altogether with the planets and the dying stars that inhabited once this sector. So it is always a question of coordinates, point of reference. And there is a simple trick that I would like to offer. It's attempting to feel these raw powers as ontologies, as divine forces, as the vasanas or pure force tainted with natures, pure force, Shakti, tainted with natures, vasanas, dispersed across the universe in various proportions, arrays, harmonies, disharmonies, cacophonies, beautiful symphonies, or downcast beeps. So the trick is to take those raw forces and put it into your work, into everything you do. In other sense, you posit a certain realistic idealism in which you try to refine the finest of wisdom of all civilizations by reading, contemplating, reflecting upon it, and then incorporating it into your person, into your work. And people are yearning for these honest forces, but they're offered surrogates upon surrogates and matryoshkas upon matryoshkas and matryoshkas. They cannot feel these pure, honest, splendid powers anymore in the lifeblood. And to me, it was a solution. It was stripping the facades, the masks of the modern world by stripping myself to zero like a soldier. A soldier is stripped down to zero and then it is trained. It's the same for the magician and the metaphysician. You're stripped to a zero in complete despair and agonizing pain. And then you find this final point that if you don't destroy yourself, you start understanding and feeling those ideas as true forces, not some philosophy, not some abstraction, but true forces that you philosophize about and interpret. And once you find it, there is no going back. You don't want any dishonesty. You don't want any falsity. It may be considered a parable that when you mutually love, for example, a woman that you love unconditionally, and she unconditionally loves you, built on perfect trust, understanding, and with a diamond like clarity that shatters iron, fetters, destroys all things. And it is, as in the Book of Changes, describing the fellowship of man and woman, that it is scented with orchids. It's the most beautiful honesty of brotherhood, sisterhood, and companionship that you may achieve. And if you have a man that was stripped by agony and torment to zero, and a woman that suffered a lot, went through a lot of pain, and they find each other, and they feel they love the idea of each other through those forces, then that's the diatemic eros philia agape. Nothing more to add. So when this happens, and through a great loss, love will tear you apart, you lose each other as magister and maestra, going your own ways and perhaps being fed lies and distraction. When you catch this thread of these pure forces, you never want to go back to lies, this honesty, this heroic frenzy that possesses you, but it is of great clarity and great perfection. You don't replace it with anything else because it will be a lie, a falsity. And you may say that humans cannot reach objective truth. Anyone saying I am truth is a liar, like that criminal Zero from 11, those crooks. Fuck it. Truth, truths are many, scientific truths, and all that I covered it in a different lecture. However, this metaphysical truth is an approximation of the Ma'at and Erta, deep laws governing not only the physical universe but the metaphysical ones. That is coinciding. Divinity is coinciding with the universe. And like Plato said, divinity tends to geometrize in the perfect order, pre-phenomenal, coinciding with the phenomenal universe. So when you find this right proportion, ratio, realization, and it may happen once in your lifetime. It may happen many times or once. You may fall closer or nearer. And realization tends to multiply realization, just like delusion multiplies delusion. Ignorance multiplies ignorance, knowledge, and intelligence multiplies knowledge and intelligence. But it's mixed. So you may multiply realization by realization, and then delusion kicks in, and then it falls apart, and you find a different realized manner, and some ignorance here, knowledge, intelligence there. But as long as it works, as long as it catches this golden thread of the Pythagorean initiations, this fog that lifts you up from your current state and is effective in the eudaimonic order, in happiness, in greatness, in beauty, in heroism, in civilizational heroism, like the Junzi of China, or the Bodhisattvic ideal in the Hindi and Buddhist ideas, then you've reached a certain notion of success in the metaphysical and spiritual fields. Now, when it comes to the, as I mentioned, Faustian post-Judeo-Christian civilization, it is the aspect of processing matter, physis, inasmuch as it is necessary. If it is deprived of those forces, it falls out of its own weight, dead weight, as we are noticing it right now. And I'm not a doomsayer. I believe that societies are very resilient to many things, and people are resilient. However, it all ends, and the question is whether this entropy of harmony and disharmony will cause more pain and suffering or less. Will it lead to a catastrophe, or whether it will lead to prosperity and this scarce metaphysical spiritual goal? Thank you.